Rachel over here at Salsa. We're just getting ready to start our presentation with our friends over at Media Cause. So before I go ahead and pass it over to those guys, they'll introduce themselves in just a minute. A few things to note before we officially get started. As always, this is being recorded, so everyone that's attending today will get a follow-up email from us, and that will include this recording as well as the slide deck as well, so you get both of those pieces of information. Everyone's muted today, so if you do have a question in the GoToMeeting control panel, you can use the chat box or the question box there. Type in your questions. I'm sure there will be a lot. We have the experts on board today with Media Cause, so no better chance than now to ask those peer-to-peer questions. We have some time at the end that we'll go through those questions and get those answered. Quick audio and visual check as usual. If someone could just chat into the box there that you can hear me and also see the screen, that would be great. And then we'll pass it over to Jess and Luke here in just a minute. We're talking all things peer-to-peer, fundraising, and events. We have a mix of clients today. Some people aren't using Salsa at all. Some people do have Salsa Engage, but you may or may not have the peer-to-peer fundraising module, which is a piece of functionality that Salsa Engage offers. Everything that Jess and Luke are going to be going over today in terms of strategy, Salsa provides the actual program to do that. So if you have peer-to-peer, great. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of how to run your event. And if you don't, we'd be happy to show it to you one-on-one after this. So if you don't have peer-to-peer but you're interested in getting it, let me know after and I can set you up with a demo. All right, so it looks like audio and visual are working, so I will pass it over to Luke and Jess.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Hey, everyone, I'm Luke. I'm an account director over here at Media Cause. A little bit about us. So we are an agency that we're based in San Francisco. Jess and I are here in Boston. We also have offices in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. So our approach is that we accelerate the growth and impact of people and organizations doing good in the world. And we focus on 5 main pillars: branding, marketing, advocacy, fundraising, and technology, in order to build meaningful connections that move missions forward. And yeah, I've been with the agency here for a little over 3 years and work heavily on a lot of our peer-to-peer fundraising work, and I'm really excited to chat with you all.
And I'm Jess. I also am an associate account strategist here at Media Cause. I work alongside Luke and also a little bit with Sarah, and particularly on some of these peer-to-peer fundraising accounts and projects. So very excited to get started.
Awesome. So here's a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So we have a brief introduction about peer-to-peer fundraising. We're going to build a foundation. We're going to talk about supporter onboarding and nurturing. And then we're going to talk about what to do after you have specifically peer-to-peer fundraising events in terms of follow-ups. And lastly, we're going to talk about emerging tools and communication channels. All right, so first up, peer-to-peer fundraising. What is it? So peer-to-peer is a shorthand for a type of fundraising that essentially asks a lot of your biggest supporters, whether they're fundraisers, whether they're donors, or whether they're non-donors, to fundraise on your behalf. And so what's really incredible about peer-to-peer fundraising is that it leverages the network effects of all of your supporters. So unlike a traditional fundraising campaign where you're simply appealing to your base for donations, peer-to-peer empowers your supporters themselves to reach out to their networks and ask their networks to donate to your organization on their behalf. So why do it? There are 4 main reasons here that we've outlined. First and foremost, it's another revenue source for your organization. It's complementary to any other sort of fundraising efforts you have ongoing in terms of individual donations, in terms of mid or major giving. It's another type of program that you can put into practice that allows individuals to feel closer to you and to go further on your behalf. And then secondly, in terms of reach, so peer-to-peer fundraising amplifies your reach outside of just your own online channels. You know, if you think about your email list size or your social media following, that is, you know, sort of as far as you can go if you're just going out to people directly. But with peer-to-peer fundraising, you are able to reach outside your core audience to everybody that your supporters who fundraise for you are connected to. And so then in terms of building relationships, I think what is one of my favorite parts about peer-to-peer fundraising is that for somebody who counts themselves as a supporter of yours, it really helps them feel closer to you because they essentially are armed to be an extension of your organization. You know, they are able to go out and really take pride in the fact that they're representing you all and they're sticking their neck out there, but they're also doing it because they believe in you. And, you know, after their fundraising, and especially once they're successful at peer-to-peer fundraising on your behalf, it becomes a point of pride and they're that much closer to you moving forward. And then lastly, most interestingly here is social proof. So, you know, what's difficult sometimes about going out and fundraising just on a individual sort of direct basis as an organization is you're basically asking individuals who may or may not know you to trust you, you know, and that they should trust that giving to you is going to be worthwhile and is going to make an impact. And so if you think about peer-to-peer fundraising, what's great is that the people who are fundraising on your behalf are basically vouching for you, right? You know, they're saying that this group is worthy of your support. I am a supporter myself, and I invite you to do the same. And so that's really kind of incredible in giving your organization a leg to stand on and, you know, providing a sense of authenticity. Alrighty, and so why do it? There's some really interesting numbers here that we wanted to call out. First and foremost, peer-to-peer is growing every year. There's a lot of great technology out there, such as Salsa, and there are many new and easier ways to dip your toes in and get started on peer-to-peer. But interestingly enough, only 18% of donors across the nonprofit space have created themselves a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. But on the other hand, an overwhelming majority, 87% of millennials and Gen Xers say that they're actually willing to fundraise on behalf of an organization using peer-to-peer. And so only 33% of nonprofit organizations are actually leveraging peer-to-peer, which really, I think, calls out a major opportunity if you're not already on board and are not already doing peer-to-peer fundraising to give it a shot, because especially if you have a younger supporter base, this number in the middle here really shows that this sort of younger demographic, which oftentimes can go ignored when it comes to fundraising because it's thought that, you know, they're young and they don't have the money to give back to my organization, they're not in a place to give. It may actually be worth revisiting that and thinking about, well, you know, maybe they themselves don't have much disposable income right now, but they are highly motivated and highly involved, and actually they can be just as valuable, if not more valuable to us if we are able to initiate and activate their support in the form of a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about building a foundation. So throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about a client of ours here at the agency called Tap Cancer Out, and using them as basically an example and a model to sort of show you what we've been able to get into place in terms of a framework for peer-to-peer fundraising. So as you can see here on the right, they work in sort of the sports cause-based space, and they work more specifically within the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community. So they have a really cool approach where they themselves run peer-to-peer fundraising events all around the country and have been expanding rapidly each year, where they host full-fledged Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments where peer-to-peer fundraising is an integral component of those events. So I think they'll serve as a really nice example to walk you all through. I think the thing to just keep in mind here is that some of the work that you'll see and some of the processes that we put in place have taken years to do so. So it's worth not getting overwhelmed here if you feel like there's a lot of complexity, because it takes time, and it's just a commitment to continue to put more of these processes into place and to get more familiar with peer-to-peer. All right, so here is just a bit of a lay of the land of a sort of community-centric approach to peer-to-peer fundraising and what goes into it when it comes to an event. So, we think about these sort of three phases here, where, of course, part of the work whenever you're going out and promoting an event, and especially when it's a peer-to-peer fundraising event, is ensuring that you're getting enough registrations to make it a successful event. But in our minds, that's really just the start, right? Because you want to focus, especially when you're asking your supporters to fundraise on your behalf, be it a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament or a run or a walk or anything of that nature. You want to make sure that you are doing quite a bit to make them successful at it, so that at the end of the day, after they attend the event and they walk away, they feel proud of their efforts and they feel like they made an impact. And so that, especially if it's somebody who's fundraising for an organization for the first time, doesn't come naturally and takes a bit of hand-holding. So we think of that all under this bucket of fundraiser nurturing. And then finally, something that we really champion here at MediaCause is tracking and analysis. So we ensure that whenever we're running a campaign like this and whenever we're thinking about peer-to-peer, we're setting up the right tracking at the get-go so that we can measure it and analyze it and build reports and learn from our successes and our failures after the event has wrapped up. And then on the bottom there, you can see some of the channels that we utilize when we're going about this work that you should keep in mind. There's, of course, what you're going to be doing over email in terms of marketing and trying to get past registrants to come back. What you might set up and what we'll get more into in terms of nurturing, both manual and automated through email. But there's also quite a bit you can do if you have the budget. On top of that, in terms of search advertising, what you can do with social media ads, or even what you can do with organic social media. All right, and so this is just a bit of a example for you all of, when we're setting out for one of these campaigns and we're thinking about, to my earlier point of measurement and tracking, what we look at when we're thinking about peer-to-peer fundraising. And so it's really important to think of these two buckets as interwoven, right? Because you're going to have your overall KPIs, which is marketing jargon for key performance indicators. You're going to have those KPIs both overall for the event, things like the total you raised for the event in terms of fundraising, the net of that, the average that was raised per registrant, which is a very important number to look at event over event. Things like transacting fundraisers if you have a mixed model where some people might not be fundraisers, and things like, of course, total number of registrants. But also just as important is your marketing KPIs, right? If you think about everything you do online to generate attention, you can think about things like RSVPs to a Facebook event. You can think of the registrations that were made specifically from your marketing work, whether it's ads or organic social media or email campaigns you sent out. And then trying as best you can whenever you're considering the funds you're spending on your marketing to also think about your return on impact, your return on investment, but in the nonprofit space here. What did you generate in terms of fundraising revenue at the end of the day for what you spent to get people out to your event? And then we always like to think about funnels here at the agency. We always like to look at our work in stages here, and I think it's very valuable to think about both in the lens of our example here with Tap Cancer Out, but for any event you might be planning. you can think of it in stages here where, first and foremost at the top of this funnel, and if you can't read that, that is the awareness stage, where you're doing quite a bit to try to attract people, just get them generally aware of your event and the fact that it's happening and the date and the time and what's involved. And that might, manifest itself in them at least raising their hand and RSVPing in a very light way in a Facebook event. And that might lead down into consideration where they then start to engage on posts in that Facebook event. Maybe they're asking questions, maybe they're sharing it around to their friend network to see if other friends might want to come out if they do register. But ultimately that leads down to that third stage, which is really the conversion of it, which is literally getting them to sign up. And then from there, as it narrows, because not everybody is going to go all the way down the funnel, but as they do convert, then the work begins about actually nurturing them and providing them information and making them successful at being a fundraiser. All right, and then just a quick note on paid media. We talked about this briefly. It's, of course, up to you all about what you have to invest in paid media, and perhaps you might not have a large budget here, or you might want to experiment, but worth noting that nonprofits overall sharply increased their digital ad spend in 2018 by 144%. So if you are in a crowded market where you're competing with other events the same date that your event is on, it's worth considering what you might be going up against in terms of advertising here. But if you think about advertising, we do quite a bit of it here to support the peer-to-peer events that we promote. You can use it in a number of ways. One of the most handy ways, I'd say, is on Facebook using remarketing ads together with a pixel that you might add to your website to sort of go back out and follow up to people who visited your nonprofit's website. You probably see this a lot already from, clothing brands, sites like Amazon that follow you around the internet. And you may have just looked at a product and then immediately you get it in your news feed and you think, wow, that's really creepy. That's what this is all about, but you can use it and it's equally as powerful if you are promoting a cause here. There are other aspects to advertising too, if you have the budget to support it, such as growing your list so that when you do have an event, you have a larger list to go out to and to build off of. Certainly part of, having a successful event, be it peer-to-peer or otherwise, is, having a built-in base to go out to and not having to do this work from scratch if you can help it. And then finally, this example you can see here on the right is an ad that we have run for Tap Cancer Out and do run for all of their events, which is an event response ad format on Facebook to generate RSVPs, which we then follow up with over time to ultimately generate registrations and activate fundraisers.
So once you've decided that you want to add peer-to-peer fundraising into an event or your model for fundraising, the first thing you really need to do is define the fundraiser journey. So you need to figure out what are your goals for the event, the stages of the funnel, and how or what type of content you need in order to keep people moving from registration all the way to the day of the event and get them to fundraise in the most successful way. So you want to keep it focused on the community that you have and figuring out who they are and how to engage with them. So once you figure that out, you need to plan and you need to create all of your content before you decide to go live. So basically what we like to do is take a gut check of all of our content and establish, does our content do at least one of these 5 things? Does it educate your supporters on why they should fundraise for your organization? So you're telling someone who registered for the event why they should go a step further. Does your content teach your supporters how to fundraise and how to convince other people to donate? Does it encourage and inspire your supporters? So once they've decided to fundraise, are we helping them and like kind of holding their hand in keeping them continuing towards fundraising before the event? This can be done through milestones and goals? And is our content also congratulating our supporters for all of the hard work and participation that they're putting in? They're going the extra mile, and they should get that pat on the back through all of that nurturing content that we're giving them. And then lastly, we want to make sure our content is thanking them for going so far, and teaching them how to thank their donors too. So they're going out into their community and they're asking all of these people to donate to your organization. So we want to thank them for doing that, and also teach them how to properly thank the people in their life that are supporting their fundraising. So what we like to do is look at our content and sort of bucket it into two different types of content goals. So either this content needs to convert our current supporters into fundraisers, or it needs to convert their network into donors. And this can be done through different types of content. So you can look at social media posts, plan out before you decide to have your fundraising go live, what sorts of posts we want to put on social media that can go along with what we were saying about paid ads, things like that. We want to map out all of our email fundraising flows. So figuring out in the last slide, what is the journey that our fundraiser needs to take. We need to draft all of those emails, and then this particularly is important for if you're going to use audience segmentation and you need different variations of each email based off of how engaged your supporter is, how long they've been a part of your organization, if they've chosen to fundraise already or they need a little push to fundraise. And then you want to look at, do I have the right toolkits for my fundraiser? So that's things like flyers or posters, or if you're going to write a how-to blog post teaching them how to fundraise, those little tips and tricks that they need, and in order to go out into their community and be able to fundraise and then give other people the information they need in order to donate. So that brings us into supporter onboarding and nurturing. So the first thing you want to do is understand your audience, or that this is the main thing when you're trying to figure out what somebody needs in order to become a fundraiser. You need to make use of your segmentation. So understanding that different types of fundraisers need different types of messaging. Like we were saying before, if they're a fundraiser that is really experienced, so a pro fundraiser, they need different types of advice to keep them going further year after year. But if they're brand new to fundraising, they need a little bit more hand-holding in the content that you're giving them. You also want to consider your audience personas. So do you have kids who are fundraising? Do you have adults who are fundraising? What is their community like? So with organizations like Tap Cancer Out, we want to make sure that we're looking at the audience persona of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor. So what is the world that they live in, and how can we leverage that in the type of content that we give them? We also want to make sure that communication is a two-way street. We're not just handing them things and walking away. We're constantly reaching out to them. We're checking in on how they're doing. And we're collecting information on what types of fundraising content resonated best and was most helpful, so we can continue to give them the right type of content throughout their journey up until the event. So it all starts with crafting your email welcome series that's specific to peer-to-peer fundraising. So this is a little bit different than your normal organization welcome series, because in your normal organization's welcome series, someone has just signed up to learn more about your organization, and all you want them to do is get familiar. With a peer-to-peer fundraising welcome series, someone has signed up to join you on the day of your event, and we need to educate them on fundraising and how to inspire others in their life to take action for their cause. So a lot of the best practices that we follow when we are developing this welcome series that someone will receive after they've registered is determining how long this welcome series needs to be based off of, again, our audience persona, what type of hand-holding they need. We want to give them small, simple steps that they can take to be more effective fundraisers. So a lot of what we tell in the Tap Cancer Out fundraiser welcome series is advice on how they can leverage their Instagram account, or advice on how they can use their fundraising page to inspire people that visit it. We want to also show rather than tell by sharing screenshots of the platform and different examples of fundraising pages. So we want to show them basically the stories of our most successful fundraisers and how they can aspire to reach like the pinnacle fundraiser for your organization. We also want to offer answers to any questions they have and provide personalized advice. So what we like to do is, again, this goes along with segmentation, is personalizing the fundraising that we give them based off of whether or not they're an adult or they're a child, or they have a fundraising team, or they're fundraising all by themselves, things like that. So this is just an example of a type of fundraising welcome series for peer-to-peer fundraising. This is for an organization that doesn't segment out based off of if someone has registered for as a fundraiser or not. So this welcome series is just treating anyone as an event registrant who could potentially fundraise in the future or throughout this process. Ideally, you get to the point where you have the type of technical ability to break this out into different flows, where if someone is a fundraiser, we can treat them a little bit differently versus if they need a little push to convert. We can congratulate them based off of if they've reached certain goals. But this is just sort of the general welcome series to get someone to become a fundraiser. So we talk about thanking them for registering. We give them advice on how to, the technical side of setting up their fundraising page based off of whatever platform you choose to use for your peer-to-peer fundraising. We give them human impact stories and stats about the organization and mission, and this does two things. It helps them feel more engaged and inspired with the decision they made to go to your event and fundraise, and then it also gives them sort of the pitch of your organization and the pitch of the goal here that they can then say to other people in their lives, inspiring their friends and family to donate. And we also want to remind them what the impact of their fundraising efforts will be for the day of the event, and sort of set the goals for their fundraising. This can be telling them that they can set their own personal fundraising goal, and which makes it an individual experience for them. But we also want to remind them that, say, the day of the fundraising event, we want to reach a certain dollar amount collectively. So we're telling them that this is their own personal mission, but you're also part of a whole here. And then we want to talk about the fundraising perks. So what we tend to use for Tap Cancer Out, at least, is giving them things to work towards, and then teaching them how to get there. So mostly we want to just empower our supporters to become better fundraisers. We're arming them with the knowledge and tools they need to be your organization's best evangelists. We're giving them resources and advice on fundraising, and essentially this fundraising welcome series is just a toolkit for them. So these are just some examples of emails that we'll send. We will tell our fundraisers that the best kept secrets to successful fundraising. We'll tell fundraising success stories, and we make it really digestible and easy for them to apply to their own fundraising experience. So like what we were saying earlier, we like to use perks and rewards to get fundraisers to stay motivated throughout the journey. So they've decided to fundraise. So now what are they working towards on an individual level, not just your whole event goal? So what we tend to do here is that using these particular perks will let someone earn free complimentary registration into Tap Cancer Out. We'll get them to earn different physical, tangible milestones like T-shirts, backpacks. Do you have anything else to add on that one?
So I mean, the only thing to kind of add on here is that, of course, through the years here, we've added on to these perks and rewards, and Tap Cancer Out has their own digital store and e-commerce operation. And you might not have that, and that's completely fine. The idea here is to use any sort of perks and rewards to further incentivize people to take the plunge and give it a shot. You know, it could be something as simple as a high level perk for a certain milestone where you get dinner with the founder of your organization, or at the very least just starting with one or two perks, based on what you're already going to be having available at the event. I think the important thing is to just use this as a way to make people feel like they are getting something in exchange for their efforts. We know that, of course, we'd all like to think we're just charitable folks and we're doing it all to make an impact, but the truth is that people are willing to go further and above and beyond if they feel like they're getting a little something else. They're going to take home some swag. So it's worth keeping this in mind as a strategy to put into place. And furthermore, what we then do in terms of perks is, not only message them and make them a part of the offer, so to speak, but, when people do reach those perk levels, a certain amount of dollars fundraised through the life cycle of the event, we congratulate them. We use email automation so that when somebody hits their goal, they're sent an email automatically saying congrats, letting them know and sort of reminding them what they earned, and most crucially, focusing them on the next goal so that they continue to fundraise and don't slack off, but reach a little bit higher. So in the case of TCO, we have videos, short, exclusive videos that are sent with those emails that are directly from the founder of the organization, saying a few quick words and giving thanks in a way that is authentic. What we also do in terms of this process of celebrating progress and milestones is we'll send reminders when somebody's getting close to a certain dollar amount reward, so that if they might be stuck at, say, 75% of the way, we follow up and give them a little motivation, a couple tips, or just the knowledge that they're getting close. And so that's what you can kind of see here in this graphic. And you can also see in this flow here what we do to further incentivize this and play up the competitive nature that I think is at play for a lot of these peer-to-peer events that may have a sporting element or otherwise are about doing your best. We send out emails leading up to the event that we call progress reports that talk about the overall collective fundraising happening at the event, and list out the top individual and top team fundraisers. So it's another way to sort of lightly apply pressure to individuals to keep on pushing themselves from a fundraising perspective. And then furthermore, we ensure that, for all the great work that is done to make an event a success, we embrace an approach where we're leveraging all of the channels and especially social media leading up to the event to ensure that people know where things stand overall and can see how close they might be to the overall goal for the day. As you can see here on the right, this is a post on Instagram that is speaking about the overall goal for this one event, which was reached with a message inspiring everybody to reach a little bit higher and blow that goal out of the water. And then finally, on the day of the event, the thing to make note of here is that, of course, we're not going to tell you how to run your event, and every event is going to be different. But what you want to make sure you do is, if at all possible, have some level of social media presence on the ground at the event. It doesn't need to be full-on live streaming every second of the day, but if you can have somebody, be it a staffer or even a volunteer who might want to man the controls on the Instagram account for the day and just document things and how they're going, it can have a very big effect at maximizing your reach for anyone who wasn't able to attend, but also for anyone who was able to attend, to instill a sense of pride about what's happening that day and what they are a part of. And of course, what you should keep in mind is that for certain fundraising events, and especially in the example here for Tap Cancer Out, fundraising continues on the day of the event. So if that's the case for you, using social media to cover the event can bolster your fundraising even more.
So now your event happens, but the work isn't over in terms of the engaging with your supporters. So what you want to do next is you need to follow up with them. They took the time to fundraise and reach out to the people in their lives to donate to your organization, and you want to thank them. Something that we like to do is we like to, this comes in the form of sending videos, of posting on social media, thanking your supporters, but the key is just to make it personal and feel really authentic. You want them to know that you appreciate everything that they did for you, and you also want to give them advice on how to thank the people in their lives that helped them reach their fundraising goals, and who also made the event's fundraising a success, even if they weren't a registrant. So something that we follow in doing our social media or having social media posts, thanking people afterwards, is highlighting the collective impact. So when someone is peer-to-peer fundraising, they have milestones, they may be focusing on their own personal fundraising efforts. So they're thinking about, okay, I reached my personal goal the day of the event, I reached my milestones, I got all my perks. But reminding them that why they did it in the broader context of bringing it back to your organization and the community that they now got further involved in. So you can do this through highlighting your most impactful supporters. So doing this through things like leaderboards, showing the day of the event or after the event, the people who raised the most, the people who had the most amount of donors, the people who had the largest fundraising team. You're highlighting the community. So in this picture, we have a picture of the event and everyone who competed at the event. And the copy in this social media post is very transparent and authentic, and it shows the individual stories of impact. And then another really important thing to do is to ask for feedback. So you want to ask your fundraisers, what did they use, what fundraising techniques did they use that helped them reach their goals? Whether this is you're asking, did I support you as a fundraiser well enough, or did you come up with something on your own that then I can share to other fundraisers? You want to figure out what's working and what isn't, so that their fundraising experience next year will be even easier, and they can become even more dedicated supporters. So things to think about here is leveraging things like surveys, quizzes, or polls. You want to get as much data as you can, and you want to make your supporters feel like they have, by asking them questions about their experience, you're making them feel like they have buy-in and impact on where the organization is headed next and what the fundraising experience for the next year might be. And you want to break down some of these follow-up questions into things like event logistic questions. So did you have a good time at the event overall? You can ask them things like marketing questions. How did you figure out, or how did you decide to register for the event or hear about us? And then you want to ask them things like fundraising questions. How successful was your fundraising? How do you feel about your fundraising efforts? So for TCO, for example, when we do these surveys, we like to think about who our supporters are, how engaged they are, so then looking at what they're willing to fill out. If we know that they were a super engaged fundraiser, they might be willing to fill out a longer survey with maybe open response. If they were just a registrant or the parent of a child who decided to attend, they might not want to fill out a longer survey about their experience. And then you want to be deliberate about the questions that you're asking and thinking, how can I turn this into data to improve our processes for next year? And then the key here is also that there's plenty of free tools that you can use. So this is just a Google survey. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can send it out over email. You could crowdsource some feedback on social media, things like that. And just some examples on how this has been really critical for TCO is that we looked at a lot of this survey data, and we learned that people were answering the survey data that they were actually a parent of a competitor or a parent of a child fundraiser. And we could look at our data and see that children who are fundraising told us that they were fundraising in person. We didn't have anything in our fundraising toolkit that would really help them excel at fundraising in person or as a child. So then we decided, next year we're going to amplify that content and really segment that email audience to make sure we're getting that content to the right fundraisers.
Yeah, and I think it's, this really is such an important slide here because, it's about humility. It's about letting your supporters know that, the events are never going to be perfect, but you want to learn and listen to them and improve every event that you host. So this is just such a great tool that you can use that, as Jess mentioned, doesn't need to cost you anything, but just a little bit of time to think through the right questions and the right approach, and just ensure you do it in a timely manner after each event so you can compare trends and make improvements each time. All right, so lastly, some emerging tools and communication channels. So first and foremost, Facebook Fundraisers has really had a dramatic impact on the nonprofit space since it was first introduced. And it is something that can't be ignored, that you need to have a strategy for. But if you think about it in the context of a peer-to-peer fundraising event, you need to know where it plays into it, right? Because, for example, for a group like Tap Cancer Out here, you can see they're leveraging it for birthday fundraisers, which in itself is an additive thing. It's something they're doing on top of the events that they host. But for the events that they host, we actually deliberately will turn off some of the Facebook fundraising features so as not to create confusion amongst supporters, because what can happen is if you have features left on, like the donate button, and you have somebody who's sharing a link to their fundraising page that's not on Facebook, they might prompt them to add a donate button, which they might then do because they don't know the difference between the two. And you could find, and we did find this early on for this organization, that it led to a lot of scrambled data where you didn't really have a true indication of how much somebody raised because it was raised over multiple platforms. So it's worth keeping that in mind. It's worth having a strategy here for fundraisers because it is a wonderful platform in terms of the ease of use. If somebody is already on a platform like Facebook and do want to give, but think about how you could use it if it's a strategy for a certain time of year or something like these birthday fundraisers. And always keep in mind that no matter what the short-term fundraising revenue that it might bring in, there is a cost in the fact that you don't necessarily have full control over who those individuals were who gave to you in a way that another tool might provide you access to. So in general, you always want to weigh those things, but there is no getting around the fact that you have to have a strategy for a platform like this. And then most recently, and exciting enough, is Facebook introduced a new feature for Instagram called the Donate sticker, which is fantastic because of just how many people use stories nowadays. Over 500 million users are on stories on Instagram every day. So this new sticker is something that can be added to a story and can be linked to an organization the same way that Facebook and Facebook fundraisers can. And you can easily donate right through the platform in a similar manner. After you do some confetti drops, it's nice and fun, it's nice and light. But again, it's something where you need to figure out the best place to fit it in. You can message individuals or create a story in your own right where you're explaining the feature and showing your supporters how to use it. Or you can post it yourself as a sticker around an event or a cause and have them donate directly through there. So it's something that can be used in a peer-to-peer capacity where you tell individuals to use it as a way to raise funds, perhaps not officially, but in an unofficial capacity, kind of just spreading around the network. And as you get into peer-to-peer, might be a way to utilize it. It is useful as well if you might not have a full peer-to-peer operation up and running, and you want to try out some features on platforms that you have a presence. But again, the same cautions are here with Instagram, where you don't really have full information and reporting on the individuals who do give. So it may lead to some one-time donations, but oftentimes it's not really the start of a true relationship in the same way that using technology that is more dedicated to peer-to-peer fundraising can allow you to do. All right, and then a quick note here on text messaging. So text messaging is also an area that is emerging right now and is something to think about. First and foremost, you have to understand whether or not you're collecting cell phone numbers from your supporters. If you are, this may be something to explore. If not, you might want to consider starting to do that, because this is a channel that you should think of in parallel to a channel like email, where it's another way to blast out messages to somebody who is bought in and is on your list, but may appeal better, especially to a younger audience that at this point is more trusting and accepting of having brands and organizations in their text messaging inbox, and perhaps might even prefer that to email, which can be really quite overrun nowadays. And an amazing stat here is just that 95% of texts are read within 3 minutes of being sent. So that tells you the opportunity. There are a number of tools out here that can help you here. There, is just sort of the burden of whether or not you have this data and whether you have the capacity to get a full program up and running. Because if you were to try to do this, and especially if you were to go out to your base and ask them if they wanted to receive text messages from you, it's a commitment. Again, you want to make sure that you are reaching them on a regular basis and you're forming a relationship with them there, much like you would any other channel. All right, so that does it for us, but we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was really informative. Lots of good stuff. We love peer-to-peer here at Salsa. Like I said, if some folks here may or may not have the peer-to-peer module, so hopefully if you do have it, you've utilized it or plan to utilize it. And if you don't have it, hopefully this has piqued your interest and has given you some ideas about how you can utilize it at your own organization. So now we'll open it up for questions. Like I said, the chat box or the question box in the GoToMeeting control panel is where you can submit those. So we haven't had any come through just yet, but I'm sure there are some out there. So we'll wait for folks to chat those in. While we're waiting for that, I do want to mention, as I'm sure some of you have already seen, Salsa published our very first peer-to-peer fundraising playbook. And that was in the email invite that I had sent out for this June Partner Pep Talk series. A link to that to download it was in there, and we've also shared it on social media. And I think it really piggybacks on everything that Media Cause has talked about today. So I'd recommend everyone here go and find it, open up the email, go on social media to download it. Or you can always just email me and I can send you a link to download it. But I think now is a really popular time for peer-to-peer fundraising events too. That's actually a question that I have for either Luke or Jess. Do you guys find that peer-to-peer has a season, or is it just kind of all over the place in terms of when you see organizations running peer-to-peer events?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say no, it doesn't necessarily have a season. It really depends more on your own schedule as an organization and what you have running and what you intend to do in terms of events. I don't think it's sort of the thing where you need to pigeonhole it to a certain time of year, like Giving Tuesday. I think it's something that can be used in as many ways as you can think of throughout the year, as long as you have the infrastructure to support it and you're running events. I think it's a tool that can be used throughout the year.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that too here at Salsa. We see a lot of organizations using the peer-to-peer module for 5Ks, runs, walks, things like that. But also any other type. It doesn't even have to be a physical event. You can kind of have a peer-to-peer fundraising virtual event, if you will, right? Just having some sort of way that your supporters can show their interest and their support. I don't know if Media Cause has seen that, but we certainly have too, where there's actually not a physical event, but more of an online fundraising virtual event.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is another option, and especially if you have the technology, you don't only need to do it and utilize it when the event is running, but you can build sort of a program or brand out an identity for individuals who have chosen to be peer-to-peer fundraisers. Give it a snappy name that relates to your organization, and leave it on for them to get involved with. And especially like we mentioned with those perk levels, that's something that you could use to incentivize people to sign up and do that kind of fundraising on their own, online, on their own schedule.
All right. Thanks for that. So we may have a little glitch. If you guys are chatting in questions, but I am not reading them, it's because I'm not receiving them, and I'm not sure why that is. Usually we have questions coming through, but I have someone internally on this who said that she had chatted in a question, but I didn't get it. So we may have an issue there. I will follow up. Her question, though, is on email series, which is something that Salsa Engage can actually do, the email series that you can create and send out in Salsa Engage using that feature. Do you guys have a suggestion on the time frame for how many of those email series, or what the time frame should be between those?
I think it depends on how engaged like your audience is, and and I also think something important to consider is like the trigger of the email series. We've seen that email series are a little bit more successful when the trigger is right after registration, and then working off from there. Sometimes we see that when organizations use the trigger as the day of the event and work backwards, it's a little bit it's not as successful in terms of open rates. But I think that that sort of question goes back to then looking at your data after you run an event, and seeing, where do your open rates drop? Are you sending too many emails, and then adjusting from there? But we usually recommend about 3 to 5 days between each email, and it depends on like the action that you're asking for each email. So if you're just asking that they set up their fundraising page, you can send that right away. If you're asking for them to take a little bit of a heavier lift in a fundraising tip, so you're asking them to ask people at your work to fundraise, or post on Instagram or something like that, like it kind of depends on when, or the lift of how heavy the lift is in terms of the next time you email them.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
I think you want to just sort of think, and of course it's all dependent on what you're asking and the specifics of your event, but in general with automated emails, and especially in this context, you want to send them frequently enough so that they're reminded of you and reminded of their commitment that they made with fundraising, but not so frequent that they're annoyed and turned off from doing it in the first place.
Right. Right. So here, along that, kind of in that same vein, how would you suggest handling a supporter who registers late in the game? So they were supposed to get this email series, and maybe you have the email series that is set to cover 2.5 to 3 weeks, but someone registers within, a week out from the actual event. How do you handle that type of communication? Do you put everything and condense it into the last couple of days, or do you kind of change your kind of pitch there with the emails that they're getting?
So that's a great question. Yeah, what we try to do is certainly not jam pack everything into a few days, but what we find is that we will ensure that they at least get some of the messaging. And what we do, in fact, for Tap Cancer Out is we actually cut off some of the registration options, specifically the fundraising options, about a week or so out from the event, so that they have enough time to be somewhat successful in their fundraising. Because what we really want to avoid is somebody signing up so last minute that they are going to fail at fundraising and feel bad about it when they get to the event, or maybe not go to the event. And we ultimately want to make sure everybody who gets involved has a good experience, right? So I think creating a little buffer can help. And I think ensuring they get a little bit of the content and they get exposed at least to the basics can help. But we have seen certainly some people who sign up last minute, relatively speaking, who can still be highly effective and just make a very strong, big last minute push to get dollars in the door. So it can still work, but I think, you want to be kind of realistic about your timeline.
I think another thing to keep in mind there too is seeing if you can house some of your fundraising toolkits outside of email too. So say if you can put them on your website, put it in a blog. This way, if someone signs up a little bit later and they're not going to get all of the emails, you can still point them to another place they can go to get that content.
Okay, perfect. So let me see here. Still having some trouble getting questions to come through the GoToMeeting control panel. I know it's working because I got your visual and audio messages in the beginning. So I'm not exactly sure what happened here. So if you do have a question, I'll still try to figure it out while we have a few minutes here. But if you do happen to have to hop off, you can email webinars@salsalabs.com and put your question in an email, and we'll respond to you that way. But before we pop off here, too, I want to thank Luke and Jess and Sarah. I know you're in the background there. Thanks again for a really good presentation. If you guys pop to the next slide there, we can show media causes, contact information if anybody here is in need of the awesome services that our friends at Media Cause do, strategy work, and all that good stuff for communications, and Salsa's contact information too there for anyone on board that doesn't have Salsa services. And if you're interested, if you are a current Salsa client but you don't have peer-to-peer, email into either sales@salsalabs.com, or you can email into the webinars email, and we'll get you pricing and a timeline for getting peer-to-peer activated for you.
Great. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining. It's been a blast talking to you about this. And yeah, as Rachel said, we are happy to answer any questions you might have over email. Just feel free to shoot them over either to Rachel, or you might email us here as well. So we look forward to hearing more from y'all.
Okay, so I'm just going to hang out here for just a few more minutes. I do apologize. I don't know why these questions aren't coming through in the control panel, but I guess that's technology for you sometimes. Any other tips or tricks that you guys want to share over at Media Cause?
Yeah,
Probably all shared them. They were all in the presentation.
Yeah, I think we had a good deal in there. I think there's certainly some bullet points that we didn't read through. We didn't want to just read through everything on each slide, so I encourage you to take a look at the presentation after and read through some of the other information that we included. Again, yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to talk more.
Okay, great. So I won't keep anybody any longer. Hopefully, what I'm hoping the case will be is after I end this GoToMeeting session, we always get a report after in GoToWebinar where I can see everyone's questions just in a spreadsheet. So fingers crossed that that is the case and all of your questions are being recorded there. If so, we'll follow up via email and answer your questions through an actual email. But go ahead, I'll let everyone go now. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you back here at our next Partner Pep Talk. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.